I always believed betrayal would come with thunder, shouting, tears, slammed doors, maybe even a dramatic exit. But when it arrived, it came quietly, like fog slipping through an unlocked window. That morning, his business trip began like all the others. He stood in the kitchen, half-dressed, pretending to scroll through work emails while I poured coffee. His suitcase sat by the door, perfectly zipped, like a symbol of stability. He kissed me softly, said, "I'll call you when I land," and smiled that same smile he'd used to convince me of everything over the years, that we were solid, that love was enough, that he was the man I could build forever with. I watched him leave, the tail lights fading into the dawn, and I remember feeling lucky. How ridiculous that word feels now. Lucky to have a man who worked hard, who provided, who never complained. Lucky to be loved by someone I didn't realize had already left me months ago. The first day passed quietly. A few texts, a quick call. The second day, silence. No good morning message. No, I miss you. Not even a lazy emoji. By evening, the silence had weight. I called. No answer. Called again. Straight to voicemail. I told myself stories, bad signal, busy meetings, maybe even a dead phone battery. We women are experts at writing fiction that keeps us calm. But then I saw it, the story I didn't want to read. My best friend, Lena, posted an Instagram story. A simple, harmless clip. A hotel balcony view, champagne glasses clinking, city lights glittering below. But behind the reflection in the sliding glass door, barely visible, was him. His posture, his watch, the navy blue shirt I had ironed that morning before his flight. My fingers froze around the phone. For a moment, I couldn't even breathe. My eyes refused to process what my heart already knew. I replayed it again and again until denial finally cracked open into truth. I remember the taste of that moment. Metallic, bitter, electric, like swallowing betrayal itself. That's when something inside me shifted. Not broken, no. Broken is too fragile a word. It was more like something clicked. Like gears locking in place. I booked the next flight out. Part of me that had been soft. I didn't pack much, forgiving, just simply jeans, a white shirt, and the strength that comes when you realize you have nothing left to lose. The flight was 3 hours long, but time stretched painfully slow. Every minute, I replayed every lie, every late meeting, every "she's just a friend." Every night, Lena and I drank wine together while she smiled at me with that easy, practiced innocence. I used to tell her everything. My fears, my fights, even the details of our intimacy. I handed her the blueprint of my love life, and she used it to build her own behind my back. When the plane landed, I went straight to the hotel. The receptionist smiled politely. "Good evening, ma'am. Do you have a reservation?" I forced a smile. "Actually, I'm surprising my husband. He's here on business." I gave his name. Her fingers clicked across the keyboard, her expression shifting slightly. "Yes, he's here. Room 908. Room 908. The number burned into me like a countdown. The elevator ride up was the longest of my life. My heart wasn't racing. It was steady, almost eerily calm. The calm that comes before an explosion. When I reached the 9th floor, the hallway stretched before me like a decision I couldn't take back. I walked slowly, the soft carpet muffling my footsteps, until I stood before 908. Voices. Faint laughter. Hers. I didn't knock. I didn't announce myself. I simply turned the handle, and the door opened. Inside, the air was warm with perfume and deception. Clothes scattered on the chair. 2 glasses of champagne on the table. And there they were, half-dressed, startled, frozen like guilty statues in the flash of my presence. He was the first to speak. "What are you doing here?" His tone, defensive, not ashamed, told me everything. Lena stood behind him, clutching a sheet around her, eyes wide but unrepentant. "It's not what it looks like," she whispered. I laughed. Actually laughed. "You're right," I said. "It's worse." Neither of them moved. Neither of them reached for me. And that's when I realized something truly liberating. I didn't care. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just stood there, looking at them like a scientist studying 2 failed experiments. "Don't bother explaining," I said softly. "I understand perfectly now." He tried to step forward, to reach for me, to begin his useless performance of remorse. I stepped back. No, don't touch me. You don't get to touch what you already ruined. And then I left. Quietly, gracefully, without looking back. Because looking back is for people who still need answers. I didn't. Outside, the air was cold, a relief against the heat burning inside me. I walked until I found a park bench near the water and sat there, my suitcase still in hand. The city lights shimmered in the reflection, mocking me with their calm. I didn't cry. I couldn't. It wasn't sadness that filled me. It was clarity. For years, I'd built my life around a man who needed admiration to feel whole, and a friend who needed my stability to feel superior. They'd fed off me, my trust, my loyalty, my patience. And now that I'd stopped feeding them, I realized how hungry I'd been for myself. Somewhere around midnight, I checked into another hotel across the street from his. I couldn't sleep. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, the image of their faces replaying behind my eyes. But instead of pain, I felt purpose. Revenge wasn't about hurting them. It was about remembering me. The next morning, I packed my things and returned home. I didn't answer his calls, didn't open his messages. My phone lit up with notifications. Please, let me explain. You misunderstood. I made a mistake. Every message sounded like an insult to my intelligence. Lena tried too. She sent one text that simply said, "You have to believe me." I didn't respond, because belief was the currency they'd both already bankrupted. Instead, I started planning, not for revenge, but for rebirth. I quit waiting for apologies and started building boundaries. I changed the locks, canceled the joint accounts, sold the house. Every signature on every document felt like a piece of freedom falling back into place. People often think heartbreak weakens you. It doesn't. It wakes you. I didn't tell anyone the details. I just smiled when they asked what happened and said, "I finally saw things clearly." That a week later, a mutual friend called. "Did you hear?" She asked, her voice hushed. "Lena's fiancé found out about the affair. She's completely ruined." I said nothing. "Are you okay?" she asked. For the first time, I answered honestly. "Yes," I said. "Better than ever." Because when I walked out of that hotel room, I didn't just leave them behind. I left the old version of myself too. The one who stayed quiet, the one who forgave too easily, the one who thought loyalty meant self-abandonment. Now I understood something simple but life-changing. Trust is not blind. It's earned. And once broken, it doesn't rebuild. It evolves. That was the night everything began. Not the ending they caused, but the beginning I chose. I caught him on a business trip with my best friend. And instead of breaking, I started building. Building myself. Building strength. Building a story that, for the first time, was entirely my own. The first morning after my return home was quieter than I expected. The house felt like a stranger's. Too clean, too still. Every surface holding a memory I wanted to forget. His coffee mug sat on the counter. His jacket still hung by the door. For a brief second, I considered throwing everything out. But then I stopped. Why should I be the one to erase him? He'd already erased himself. So instead, I poured my own coffee, sat in the same kitchen chair where he'd once kissed me goodbye, and allowed the silence to stretch. It wasn't painful anymore. It was power. The kind of silence that means you've taken back control. By afternoon, my phone was vibrating nonstop. Missed calls, voicemails, messages from friends who'd heard something. Apparently, he told people we were taking space. How polite of him to turn betrayal into a wellness retreat. I didn't reply. I didn't even delete the messages. I wanted them there. Evidence of how small he'd become. On the third day, he showed up. It was raining, the kind of soft drizzle that blurs everything. The sky, the trees, the line between truth and apology. I heard the knock and knew it was him before I even opened the door. He looked different, or maybe I was just seeing him clearly for the first time. The confidence that once defined him had curdled into desperation. His eyes were tired, his voice quieter. "Can we talk?" he asked. I stepped aside, not out of forgiveness, but curiosity. I wanted to hear what kind of story a liar tells himself after the truth has already burned through everything. He started with cliches. It was a mistake. It didn't mean
I let him
anything.
speak.
I wasn't
His words
thinking
clearly.
falling uselessly between us. Finally, I asked, Which part didn't mean anything? The lies or the woman you betrayed me with? He sighed. You know I love you. Love. That word. The great excuse, the ultimate weapon. No, I said softly. You love how I made you feel. That's not the same thing. He reached for my hand. I stepped back. Don't, I said. I spent years holding your hand through every storm. Now, I'm the storm. He blinked, startled. Maybe he expected tears. Maybe he expected me to beg for explanations. Instead, I stood there calm, untouchable. After a long silence, he asked, so what happens now? Now, I said, you leave. And I start living. He hesitated, waiting for me to crack, to soften. But I didn't. Eventually, he nodded and walked out. The sound of the door closing felt like the final punctuation to a sentence that had gone on too long. That night, I opened a bottle of wine. Not to drown anything, but to toast myself. Every sip tasted like freedom. I turned on some music, let fill the house that no longer belonged to us, and started dancing barefoot on the living room floor. Alone, but not lonely. People think empowerment comes with speeches and new beginnings. Sometimes, it starts with dancing to your favorite song in the ruins of your old life. Days turned into weeks. Word spread. The whispers came. She caught him. With Lena. No way. They were so perfect. That word again. Perfect. The illusion everyone adored. I'd lived in that illusion for years. Picture-perfect marriage, career, friends. But the truth was simpler. Perfection hides everything that hurts. Friends took sides. Some stopped calling, uncomfortable with the scandal. Others reached out, full of pity I didn't want. You'll find someone better, they said. As if healing was a contest I could win by replacing him. But I didn't want someone better. I wanted to become someone stronger. I started small. Morning walks. Cooking for one. Deleting photos that no longer made me smile. Then I went bigger. I resigned from my job. It wasn't sudden. I'd been working in PR for years, managing crises for others while ignoring my own. The irony wasn't lost on me. I used my savings to rent a small studio downtown. White walls, big windows, no ghosts. I didn't know exactly what I'd do next, only that it would be mine. A few days later, I received a message from Lena. Her name flashing on my screen felt like a ghost knocking at my door. Lena, I know you'll probably never forgive me, but please can we talk? I need to explain. I almost ignored it, but something in me, not softness but curiosity, wanted to hear the justification. Betrayers always have one. So I agreed to meet. Neutral ground, a small cafe on the edge of town. When I walked in, she was already there. She looked different, or maybe I was just seeing her clearly too. The confidence she wore like armor was gone. She looked smaller, fragile even. Thank you for coming, she said, voice trembling. I sat across from her, silent. It wasn't planned, she began. It just happened. He was broken, and I was lonely. I didn't mean to hurt you. I almost laughed. You didn't mean to hurt me? I repeated. You slept with my husband, Lena. You meant every second of it. Her eyes filled with tears. He said you were distant, that you didn't care anymore. I believed him. That's because you wanted to. I leaned forward. You didn't betray me because of him. You did it because you wanted to be me, until you realized being me took more strength than you'll ever have. She looked away. I've lost everything, she whispered. Good, I said simply. Now you'll understand what rebuilding feels like. I stood up to leave. She reached out, grabbed my wrist. Please, I'm sorry. I looked down at her hand, the same one that had once clinked glasses with me, shared secrets, and held mine through heartbreak. I gently pulled away. No, you're not. You're just sorry you got caught. And I walked away, lighter, freer, and completely done. That night, I wrote for hours. Not to vent, but to remember, to take the chaos and turn it into clarity. I wrote about love that blinds, loyalty that breaks, and strength that rebuilds. The words poured out of me like confession and rebirth at once. Somewhere around midnight, I realized what I wanted to do next. Start a blog. A place where women could tell their stories, unfiltered, unashamed, unbroken. I named it The Second Sunrise. It started small. A few posts about healing after betrayal, learning self-worth, rediscovering joy. Then the messages started coming in. Your story feels like mine. I thought I was alone until I read this. Thank you for putting my pain into words. For the first time, my heartbreak had purpose. Meanwhile, he tried again. Emails this time. Long ones. Promising therapy, change, a fresh start. He even sent flowers once. Lilies, my favorite. I left them outside the door until they wilted. Love doesn't bloom from guilt. And when he finally realized I wasn't coming back, the apologies turned bitter. You're overreacting. You're destroying everything we built. I hope this makes you happy. It did. Just not in the way he meant. Months passed. My blog grew. Sponsors reached out. I started hosting workshops for women rebuilding after betrayal. Each session filled with stories that felt like reflections of my own. Different names, same wounds. Every time someone said, "I thought I'd never survive this," I smiled and told them, "You already have." Because I knew what survival looked like. It looked like standing in the ashes of your old life and realizing you're fireproof. One night, after finishing a blog post titled, "Closure Isn't a Door, It's a Mirror," I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, watching the city lights. I thought about everything I'd lost, him, her, the illusion of safety, and everything I'd gained: freedom, clarity, strength. For the first time in a long time, I whispered to myself, "You did it." And for once, I believed it. Success doesn't arrive like lightning. It comes quietly, like sunrise, slow, steady, impossible to ignore once it's there. When I started the second sunrise, I thought it would be a small corner of the internet, a digital diary for the brokenhearted. But within months, it became something else, something bigger. Women began writing in from everywhere: New York, London, Mumbai, Cape Town. The stories were raw, unedited, devastatingly honest. Betrayal, abandonment, rediscovery. The universal script of pain and survival. I read every word. I cried for some. I laughed at others. I responded to all. Soon, the second sunrise wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to every woman who'd ever been told to move on quietly. I built a team, 2 volunteers at first, then 5. We hosted webinars, live talks, and healing workshops. We weren't just talking about heartbreak. We were talking about power, about reclaiming your narrative, about standing in front of the mirror and saying, "You didn't break me. You built me." By the end of the first year, the blog had 1 million subscribers. Brands started reaching out: wellness companies, women's networks, even publishers. But I was careful. I didn't want to turn pain into profit. I wanted meaning, not marketing. Still, I accepted a book deal. The Second Sunrise: Stories of Women Who Refused to Stay Broken. It hit shelves 6 months later and changed everything. The book launch was held at a small art gallery downtown. Warm lights, soft jazz, champagne that didn't taste like guilt. I wore a white suit, clean, bold, symbolic. The kind of outfit you wear when you finally wash the past off your skin. When I walked in, the applause caught me off guard. So many faces, strangers who somehow knew me better than people I'd loved for years. I spoke briefly, thanking them, telling them that healing isn't a straight line. It's a spiral. Some days you rise, some days you circle back. But as long as you keep moving, you're healing. After the event, a young woman approached me. "Your blog saved me," she said, voice trembling. "I left my husband because of it. He cheated on me with my sister." I took her hand. "Then you've already won," I said, "because you chose yourself." That night, as I looked around the room filled with laughter and light, I realized something profound. I had become the woman I once needed. Of course, the universe loves irony. 3 weeks after the launch, my assistant forwarded me an email with the subject line: Corporate Wellness Conference, Keynote Invitation. It was a prestigious event, hosted by the Horizon Group. Thousands of attendees, top executives, major media coverage. They wanted me to deliver the closing talk, Rebuilding After Personal Collapse. I said yes immediately. It wasn't until later, while reviewing the agenda, that I saw the name. Panel speaker: Daniel Carter, Vice President, Horizon Aviation. Daniel Carter, my ex-husband. The same man who once said I'd never survive without him was now working for the company inviting me to speak about survival. I smiled. The universe wasn't just ironic. It was poetic. The day of the conference, I arrived early. My team handled the prep while I focused on breathing, slow, control, calm. The stage lights were bright, but I'd learned how to stand under brighter ones. Gossip, judgment, pity. This was nothing. As I waited backstage, I caught a glimpse of him through the side curtain. He looked older, a few lines around his mouth, hair grayer, posture heavier. But more than that, he looked small, diminished. He was speaking on a panel about corporate accountability. The irony nearly made me laugh out loud. When it was my turn, I stepped onto the stage to a round of applause. My talk wasn't rehearsed. I spoke from the scar, not the wound. I once believed, I began, that strength meant holding everything together. The marriage, the friendships, the image. But I learned that true strength is sometimes knowing when to let everything fall apart so you can rebuild it honestly. I talked about betrayal, resilience, self-worth, about how silence can destroy you and how storytelling can save you. I didn't name names. I didn't have to. The truth doesn't need to shout when it's standing in the same room. When I finished, the audience stood, a standing ovation, and right in the front row, him, applauding, slowly, hollowly, like a man watching his past become irrelevant. Our eyes met briefly. I didn't look away. For the first time in years, he was the one shrinking under my gaze. After the session, there was a reception. He approached me, of course. He always did when he needed something: forgiveness, validation, attention. "You were incredible," he said. "I'm proud of you." I smiled faintly. "You should be. You inspired the entire movement." He winced. "I deserve that." "Yes," I said. "You do." He hesitated. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. You didn't deserve any of it." I studied him for a long moment. The apology was real, but it wasn't for me. It was for his conscience. "I know," I said quietly. "That's why I finally stopped waiting for it." He nodded, a shadow passing across his face. "You've changed." "No," I said. "I just remembered who I was before I met you." He smiled sadly. "You're doing amazing things. Maybe this was always your path." "Maybe," I said, "but you were the wrong map." Later that night, alone in my hotel room, I stared out at the city lights, the same view I'd once seen from his hotel room when everything fell apart. Only this time, the air smelled like freedom, not betrayal. I thought about Lena for the first time in months. Maybe she was rebuilding. I'd heard she moved away. I didn't hate her anymore. Over somewhere no one. She'd been a chapter, an ugly one, yes, but still part of the book that made me who I am. Sometimes, healing isn't about revenge or forgiveness. It's about indifference. The moment you stop caring is the moment you truly move on. A few weeks later, the conference organizers sent me a video of my speech. Within days, it went viral. 10 million views, then 20. Comments flooded in. "This changed how I see myself. Her strength gives me hope. She turned betrayal into a blueprint for rebirth." Television networks called. Publishers wanted a second book. Investors offered to expand the Second Sunrise into a full platform, a wellness brand, an app, a podcast. I said yes to all of it because I'd spent too many years shrinking to fit someone else's comfort zone. Now I was expanding into my own power. One evening, while recording an episode of the podcast titled "What We Learned from Pain," my co-host asked, "If you could go back, would you change what happened?" I thought for a long time before answering. "No," I said finally. Because that version of me, the one who believed lies, who forgave too easily, she had to die for this one to be born. That night, I wrote one last entry for the Second Sunrise. They say betrayal breaks you, but maybe it just burns away what's fake, the illusions, the roles, the masks. And when the smoke clears, what's left is something unshakable. I don't hate the people who hurt me. They taught me how strong I am. I caught him on a business trip with my best friend. But what I really caught was my freedom. The post went viral instantly. By morning, the Second Sunrise wasn't just a blog. It was a movement. And I was the woman who turned heartbreak into empire. They say closure comes when you forgive. But I've learned something truer. Closure comes when you no longer need to. Months after my conference speech went viral, I was living in a new rhythm. Calm mornings, strong coffee, sunlight spilling across my desk, the quiet hum of purpose filling the space where pain used to live. My calendar was full. Interviews, workshops, meetings. Yet for the first time, I didn't feel overwhelmed. I felt aligned. The second sunrise had become more than a brand. It was a movement, a living, breathing community of women who refused to stay small. I'd built something that wasn't about him, or her, or even revenge. It was about reclamation. And with that came peace. The kind that doesn't arrive with fireworks, but settles like dawn, slow, golden, certain. One morning, I got an invitation I didn't expect. Women in Leadership Gala, honoring trailblazers in empowerment. I was one of the honorees. The event was to be held at the Grand Meridian Hotel, a place heavy with memory. It was where Daniel and I had celebrated our anniversary 5 years earlier, long before everything fell apart. I stared at the email for a long time. Life has a strange sense of humor, I thought. The same ballroom that once held my vows would now hold my victory. I accepted. The night of the gala, I arrived in a black gown, elegant, strong, timeless. My hair pulled back, my posture unshakable. The photographers called my name, and for the first time in years, I didn't flinch. I belonged here, not as someone's wife, not as someone's story, but as my own. Inside, the room glittered with chandeliers and champagne. I greeted familiar faces, authors, activists, entrepreneurs. Then I saw him, Daniel. He was standing near the bar, holding a glass of whiskey, looking like a man trying not to look lost. He saw me too, and for a brief moment, our eyes met, not with tension this time, but understanding. The past didn't sting anymore. It simply existed. Later, during the ceremony, they call my name. Tonight, we honor a woman who turned heartbreak into hope for millions. The founder of the Second Sunrise, Maya Carter. The applause thundered. I walked to the stage, each step steady, each heartbeat calm. When I reached the microphone, I paused, looked around the room, then began. I used to think strength meant never falling apart, I said. But I've learned that real strength is falling apart and building something beautiful from the pieces. I once lost everything I thought defined me. My marriage, my best friend, my identity. But sometimes, losing everything is how you find yourself. Because pain is not the opposite of power, it's the path to it. People listened, not just with ears, but with eyes, hearts. I smiled. So, to anyone who's ever been broken, betrayed, or underestimated, remember this. You don't owe anyone your silence. Your story might just be the light someone else needs to rise. Applause filled the room, not just polite, but emotional. A few people stood, then more, until the entire room rose to their feet. Among them, Daniel, clapping. Proud, maybe. Regretful, definitely. But this time, his approval meant nothing, because I didn't need it anymore. After the ceremony, people surrounded me, journalists, attendees, strangers with tears in their eyes. But amid the noise, I slipped out to the balcony. The night was cool, the city glowing below. I breathed deeply, calm, grounded, free. Then a voice behind me. I didn't think you'd come. I turned. Daniel stood there, hands in pockets, hesitant. I didn't think I'd need to, I said, smiling faintly. He exhaled. You were amazing up there. Thank you. A pause. Long waited. I watched everything you've done, he said quietly. The books, the movement. You've changed lives. I nodded, including my own. He looked down. I wish I'd been the man who helped you rise, not the one who pushed you there. I studied him, the man I once would have done anything for. Now, I simply saw him as part of the story. Not the ending, just a paragraph that taught me how to write the next chapter. Don't regret it, I said softly. We all play our part. You were the lesson I needed. He looked at me. Sadness, admiration, closure all in one gaze. You really don't hate me, do you? I smiled. No, I just outgrew you. And with that, I walked away. Weeks passed. The gala coverage made headlines. My speech went viral again, replayed on talk shows, quoted across social media. But behind the spotlight, my life was beautifully simple. Morning coffee, long walks, laughter with new friends, quiet evenings spent writing. Then one day, I met someone new, not in a whirlwind or through grand gestures, but in the calm, ordinary moment of life just happening. His name was Adam, a documentary filmmaker covering stories of resilience. We met at an event where I spoke about the anatomy of healing. He asked one question that caught me off guard. When did you stop surviving and start living? I thought about it for a moment, then said, the day I stopped waiting for an apology. He smiled. Then maybe that's where we'll begin. Adam didn't try to fix me. He didn't fill the silence with promises. He simply showed up, consistently, quietly, kindly. And in that simplicity, I found peace. We didn't rush. We grew. Slowly. Authentically. I told him everything. Not because I needed to, but because honesty finally felt safe again. One evening, while watching the sunset from his apartment balcony, he said, "You know, most people spend their lives avoiding pain. But you turned it into purpose." I smiled. Pain is a great sculptor. It just hurts while you're being shaped. He laughed softly. Then I guess you're a masterpiece. And for the first time in years, I didn't deflect the compliment. I just said, maybe I am. Months later, I published my second book, Rewritten, The Art of Starting Over. It wasn't about him. It wasn't about her. It was about me. And everyone who'd ever needed to remember that endings can be beautiful too. At the launch event, surrounded by women whose stories had inspired the chapters, I felt a quiet sense of completion. Not the kind you get when a door closes, but the kind that comes when you realize you were never locked in. Late that night, I sat by my window, writing one final journal entry. Closure isn't a meeting, a text, or an apology. It's the moment you stop chasing explanations and start embracing evolution. I caught him on a business trip with my best friend, but I caught myself rising higher than both ever could. Betrayal taught me love isn't about staying. It's about seeing who you become when everything falls apart. And I became free. I closed the journal, set it on the nightstand, and smiled. Outside, dawn was breaking again, quiet, beautiful, inevitable. The second sunrise. My sunrise.